Okay, thank you. The last talk for the session is going to be given by Josh from Dartmouth, and he's going to talk about how do you make video conferencing more accessible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Urban Davis from Dartmouth, and today I'll be discussing our paper, It's Not an Issue of Malice, but Ignorance Towards Inclusive Video Conferencing for Presenters Who Are Deaf or Hard of Hearing. In this paper, we will be discussing a study of existing video conferencing tools for accessibility benefits and pain points. And based on the findings from these formative studies, we prototyped and evaluated a multimodal system to support accessible video conferencing. We called this prototype system Arito. And our system comprises a browser extension that integrates several tools for real-time support for session participants who are deaf or hard of hearing, or DHH, during video conferencing. Our attention was originally brought to this space when we noticed DHH students struggling to participate in remote classrooms during COVID lockdown, which led us to the following question: how can we design video conferencing that is accessible to people who are deaf or hearing? To investigate this problem space, we devised 3 formative studies. First, we conducted surveys and interviews with members of the DHH community. We conducted an analysis of state-of-the-art support tools and commercial video conferencing platforms such as Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, with a mixed ability team of researchers. And then finally, we conducted a mock remote classroom study to fill in the gaps of understanding the accessibility limitations of current video conferencing tools and platforms. So then, based on the findings of these 3 formative studies, we began an iterative design process to build our system, which is called Arito. And then we evaluated Arito by deploying a longitudinal case study evaluating consisting of 3 sessions and 3 different tasks over the course of 1 week. And I should note before going much further that these are obviously not actual study participants. We are using these as proxies so we don't compromise the anonymity of our participant subjects. So apologies to anyone who was hoping a cat was a study participant in our project. So now I'd like to walk through some of our findings from the formative studies. Due to time constraints, I won't get into details too much about the methodology, but I do think it's important to highlight some of the key takeaways we found that were quite surprising to us during these formative works. So for example, we were surprised to find that participants who are DHH actually preferred to use VCs than physical spaces for classroom activities for a number of reasons. And this included that video conferencing systems have built-in captioning. The real world often does not. Video conferencing also has the ability to record and rewind and review material that might have been missed. And also, there's an increased chance, but not guaranteed chance, that someone using video conferencing with their camera will be looking directly at you, and thus there's an increased chance of being able to rely on lip reading for communication. We did, however, find that contrary to this preference, people who are DHH struggle significantly more when speaking and communicating and participating in video conferencing sessions than physical spaces. And this is due to a number of reasons that we unpack in detail in the paper, but here we will discuss namely that there is no real clear way to communicate their accessibility needs to the group of session participants and then have them reinforced or adhered to by the community. So to begin addressing the problems that we identified in these formative studies, we prototyped our system Arito, which, as I mentioned, is a video conferencing extension and accessibility support tool. So Arito comprises a number of multimodal tools and can be thought of as a bit of a multimodality coach for DHH speakers in these remote video conferencing sessions. So let's walk through a few of the tools now. I'm running behind, so I'm going to move very, very quickly. But one of which that I want to point out is this accessibility accommodation request system. So this allows any member of the session to make an accessibility accommodation request, which is then communicated to everyone within the session. And this provides a way to inform the group of specific accommodation needs of participants. And then each one is accompanied by a small bell, which can be rung to send a reminder to everyone and provide an opportunity to have a community-reinforced accessible etiquette protocol. We also have a couple of automated tools to help out in this domain, such as this speech volume and speech speed meters, which provide real-time feedback to participants when they're speaking to let them know if they need to slow down or speed up or speak louder or speak quieter. And you'll notice beneath each of these is a plus and minus button, and this is allows the audience to directly communicate with the participant to let them know that they may need to, that they would prefer them to slow down or speed up, and give them real-time human-to-human feedback that adjusts some of the parameters of our automated systems. We also have a suite of host tools to allow for some mediation and provide a little bit of at-a-glance data-driven information about participants' engagement and participation with the session. To start with, the host will log in, and they have an extra suite of tools. And you'll see that some of these include information about how often is communication occurring through text versus spoken word, and also how long has every member of the session cumulatively been speaking and who has spoken most recently. And this is to provide some data that is intuitive and easy to glance at, that tells us maybe who is being left out of the conversation and allows the host to be reticent of that. So to evaluate Airito, as I mentioned, we conducted a longitudinal case study over the course of 1 week. I'm going to move very quickly through these details because I am already running over time, but we had 16 participants, 3 sessions over 1 week. Each day they did a different task. The first day was an icebreaker task. The second day, we asked them to summarize an essay that they were assigned and present that to the class. And the third day, they engaged in a brainstorming co-design session that involved creating sketches to solve design problems. We chose these tasks because of their variety and commonality to be performed in VC spaces. So now, some high-level findings from this longitudinal study. We found that the etiquette guide not only was able to alter the behavior of the participants and maintain, but it also was able to be maintained across sessions and across tasks with very little reinforcement necessary from individual members of the community or from the host. Participant 7 succinctly put it, it's not an issue of malice but ignorance. No one is actually trying to make our lives as DHH people harder. They simply don't know. It's maybe worth mentioning some of the accommodation requests that were made, such as please look directly at the camera while speaking so I can read your lips. This is important for 2 reasons, because 1, our long-term vision is we could agglomerate a large collection or a taxonomy of specific etiquette that makes these spaces inclusive and accessible, and then also use that to help maybe guide which parts of this process can be automated and which cannot. Which is to say that parts of the system cannot be automated. Humans must be involved in the loop. We have evidence from the various usage of our tools that it is absolutely necessary for there to still be some form of human-to-human feedback within these systems. And finally, we also, while we initially focused the scope of our project on the, users who are DHH, we saw that there is potential to expand this to other accessibility and equity, computing equity domains. Participant 3 brought to our attention this insight. I wish this was required on all platforms, because anytime women speak for more than 30% of any meeting discussion, men think that women are dominating the conversation. Participant 3 is referencing a study from 2012 that did come to this exact conclusion. And what's interesting is this was echoed actually by many members of our group. It happens all the time in physical spaces, and you just get used to it or don't notice it. Having cold data makes it hard to dismiss and inexcusable. In fact, all 6 of the women in our study echoed a similar concern, highlighting a trend in potential broader applications of multimodal systems to address equitable and accessible computing. I'm over time, that's why this gentleman is standing over here, but there's a lot more stuff in the paper that we didn't have time to cover today. I mentioned earlier that our evaluation included a co-design task, and one of which was to design a novel mode of transportation So I'd just like to leave you with maybe a notable example from that particular session. Once again, this has been, it's not an issue of malice, but of ignorance towards inclusive video conferencing. I'd like to thank my collaborators, Hongwei Wang, Parmeesha Lana, and Shindong Yang, as well as all of the participants and co-designers who engaged with us to help bring this work to you today. Once again, my name is Josh Urban Davis from Dartmouth, and I'm happy to take questions for you now if I haven't eaten up all of my time. So thank you for your attention.
So much, great work. This is Franklin from CMU. I have a question regarding like when you were like actually doing the study, did you find like the captions actually produced or automatically generated? Did they have any like problems? Could they like predict like what is the actual problem? Is like it's too fast or is like the volume is like too low? Did you find like there's any mismatch between what they really think the problem is and the actual problem is?
Every single time there was a mismatch in some capacity. We actually, and thank you for the question, we actually analyzed a number of different commercial platforms that have captioning built into them, and we did an analysis specifically of how accurate or how on time the captions were, and we found that all of them have issues to greater or lesser extent. One of the other things we thought about for future work is actually specific systems dedicated to indicating areas of weaknesses in captioning in order to produce better systems in the future.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So thank you for the great talk. I'm building my own video conferencing platform. It's open source. And we have a concept called filters. And basically what filters do is tell like the audience or the participant and person in the video call, take off your glasses because we care about data, computer vision data quality and whatnot, and change your camera angle. Your things reminded me of instructions that could be filters as well. That was interesting in my mind. And the question I have is kind of general, so maybe if others also want to answer is, do you think that this tool should be a plugin, should be embedded into video conferencing tools just ubiquitously, or are we going to end up with many different versions of video conferencing platforms for different people?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and that's cool that you're working on your own open source project. That's awesome. So I would say like I think we did a plugin because creating embedded tools currently is just really not possible. Like with a lot of these, one of the metrics we actually looked at for accessibility of these commercial video platforms is, are they financially accessible? And kind of alarmingly, a lot of the accessibility tools you have to pay for to use, which is a barrier of financial accessibility. So I think it would be great to have a lot of these tools embedded in the future. Certain tools may be more appropriate than others. The reason we chose to do an extension at this time is just because we could make the code publicly available, we could allow people to download it and use it right away as they need, and we really do think that many of these tools would be really, really beneficial for embedding into future platforms going forward, but we wanted to ensure that everyone would have access so they don't wind up behind, you know, Microsoft Teams paywall.
What